Welcome to Apocalypse Apocrypha. I'm your host, JJ Shirty, and this is the podcast where I discuss all things post-apocalyptic. First off, thanks to everyone who continues to give me support and advice in terms of podcast production. It's all very helpful. I managed to solve a bunch of problems with episode 2 and then stumble upon a whole bunch of other problems, which was interesting. But yeah, it's a work in progress, so constantly evolving, as they say. Now, in terms of post-apocalyptic news, we've actually got some interesting tidbits this month. There is a beta test for a game called Ark Raiders. It looks like a cross between Destiny and Helldivers 2, with a splash of like 70s, 80s aesthetic. It looks interesting. It's very much like a teamwork shooter. It looks PvE and PvP. Very much a focus on sort of first-person shooting. You're taking out giant robots. Not exactly my kind of thing, but it looks cool. It's set in like a ruined Earth in the future. There was a trailer for a new game called God Save Birmingham, and it actually looks pretty good. It's set in like 14th century England, and you're not playing like a brave knight or anything. You're actually playing just a simple farmer, and you're running around a town, probably Birmingham, judging by the name. And you're fighting zombies and gathering supplies and just trying to survive. There was another game announced a few months ago. I'm pretty sure it was called Blight, and in that it's more traditional in the sense that you're a knight, full-on armored, long sword. I'm pretty sure there was a bow. You're just taking on zombies and other knights. This doesn't look like that. It looks like much more like a slow-paced, survival game. Days Gone is getting a remaster. By all accounts, it looks really, really good. I feel like the game got done dirty. It was a bit rough around, certain parts, but overall it was a really fantastic experience, but it just didn't do well enough, and it's not going to get a sequel by the looks of things. Yeah, the remaster looks really, really good. So once I sort of settle down and, get a TV again and a console, I'll get that. There is another trailer for a game called As We Survive. It looks like you're playing like a single guy running around looking for medicine for his daughter. It's unfortunate naming for the daughter, as in with The Last of Us. But, that's just a personal issue for me. Yeah, it actually looks really good. Finally, 28 years later, that's got more trailers, teasers, trailers, teasers of trailers, whatever, however they do it these days. That's looking really, really good. I was really, really excited when that first came out. Well, 28 days later. This is like, 2003, 2002 or something, like a long, long time ago. It's got like a very art house vibe to it, and I'm really hoping that they sort of keep that vibe and not adapt it to like a modern audience and, trying to meet their expectations. But the trailers are giving me hope that it's going to do the IP right. But yeah, so like I said, it's been a pretty good month for post-apocalyptic news, and so time to move on to the personal news on my front. I'm making headway on the prepper novel that I've been writing. I seem to have, crossed some threshold, and I'm allowed to continue by the company I'm working for, so that's good news. My random tables book is progressing slowly, but also along with that, I'm going to do something incredibly stupid, and I'm going to start working in the background. I'm going to start working on like a second podcast, but this one's going to be like a narrative role-playing game based podcast, if that makes any sense. It's hard to describe. It's sort of like an audio drama, but instead of just reading a story that I've written, I'm going to be playing a game and then using that to come up with the story. Now, it seems kind of left field, but I have been a bit lost in the weeds lately with two podcasts. They're not post-apocalyptic, but one is called Legend of the Bones, and the other is Tale of the Manticore. Now, I only really know about these ones because I was listening to a Fallout role-playing podcast called A Wasteland Story, and I just really, really vibe with this sort of narrative experience. You're sort of along with the game, you're hearing the story unfold along with the podcaster, so it's actually a really interesting experience. And like for Legend of the Bones and Tale of the Manticore, they've got 50 and like 150 episodes each. Once you sort of get things rolling, you really get invested in these characters. So I'm hoping I can do something like that for post-apocalyptic stories. I've found a game, like a rule set I want to use. I'm just working on the narrative I want to explore with it. I can either make it completely random, or I can, tailor it a bit more. But then, sort of just see where the story takes us. Because again, you're letting the dice tell the story. So it sounds kind of exciting and something I can get behind. And it won't be sort of long-form podcast episodes like this. The standard seems to be 30 minutes, roughly, for each episode. And it's really interesting because everyone who does this sort of thing, they all tend to talk very slowly, but they do actually have like a lot of, how would I put this? They sound like voice actors in the way they deliver the dialogue and the narrative. So yeah, just, I don't know, I'm rambling about it now, but everything about it really excites me and I want to learn to do it. So that's going to start cooking in the back. So in a few months' time, don't be surprised if you see something like that. Okay, on to this month's Prepper analysis. We're going to be looking at The Borrowed World by Franklin Horton. Now, this is sitting at 4.4 stars on Amazon with 6,513 ratings. So, you know, it's not doing that badly, you know, if I can say so myself. Anyway, yeah, so it's doing very well. And I'm pretty sure this one was written in like 2015, I think. I'll have to double check that. So the story with this one is that the US suffers like a terrorist attack on its infrastructure. And there's a guy who's on like a business trip. He works for the government in some capacity. So he's sort of stranded far away from home. It's still in his state, but it's like a long state. I don't know, American states. I'm pretty sure I drove through it once, maybe. Or nearby. Anyway, he's stranded far away from home in like the capital of his state. And well, one half of the story is how he has to get home. And the other half of the story is his wife and 2 kids are at home and how they're sort of holding down the fort until he gets back. It's sort of hitting both narratives of, you know, defending your home and getting back home. You know, that the sort of prepper expectations there. So, already off to a good start. For the main character, he starts out in Richmond, Virginia, and he needs to get back to like southwestern Virginia, which, again, I'm sort of drawing from like memory of a map here. I'm Australian. I don't look at American maps very often. But yeah, Virginia is like longer than it is tall, if that makes sense. So it's quite a long journey. If you've played Fallout 76, he heads to the Appalachian Trail, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of walking in this book, but it's pretty good. So in terms of characters, we've got a guy called Jim. He's the main character. He's a prepper, and he works for the government. He's got a co-worker called Gary. He's a bit older, but he's also a prepper. We'll sort of see through the story that like Jim is very much more of a prepper. Gary's just sort of there to sort of like normalize the prepper lifestyle, you know. It'd be a bit weird if Jim was the only one, but because we've got Gary there, it's sort of instantly normalized. And he's got someone he can discuss stuff with as well. The main character's wife is Ellen. She's back at home with the 2 kids. In terms of the kids, it's the same sort of setup we had in October 4, where like the son is a bit softer and less, you know, prepared for the end of the world. The daughter is more competent and sort of practical. So it's an interesting setup. 2 doesn't really make a pattern, but you know, it's there. We'll see if this is a reoccurring thing. Another one of the characters is an older co-worker called Randy. She's got a horrible name, but she's, you know, not a prepper, but she's, you know, typical hard-as-nails woman who can toughen up and handle anything. Again, one of the biggest sections of this audience is older women and housewives. So having a strong female character, there sort of seems to be like a integral part of this genre. Now, there is a preface for this. Do you say preface or preface? I don't know. I've never heard it said before. There's a preface, whatever. It says that this is a book for people who read those books and go to those websites. And now I'm doing like quotation finger things and you can't see me, so this doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the point is, it's just straight up telling you at the very, very start, this is for preppers who go to prepper websites and read prepper books. Setting expectations quite nicely. Okay, so let's dive into the chapter by chapter analysis. Chapter 1 opens with the mastermind of the attack. Well, he's not really the mastermind. He's more the guy who sort of initiates it. He's a Syrian who's had his like medical training in America, and he's just sort of like watching TV. He's had really good medical training, a really cushy life, but he sort of wants to tear it all down and convert everyone. Now, I can see how that would be effective for this target audience. Different person from different part of the world who believes in a different god wants to destroy us. Yeah, that seems like it would work. So this came out in 2015. And at this point, the whole, you know, war on terror thing with Muslims always being the bad guy, it was kind of cliche at this point. And just as an example, I remember going to see Iron Man 3, and when like the Mandarin was revealed to be like some, you know, Middle Eastern bad guy, I sort of like rolled my eyes. I was like, oh God, really? And then the reveal was that it was actually like some American, you know, business tycoon. Was he? Or was he just like a scientist? Anyway, it was Guy Pearce, not the Mandarin. But this book doesn't do that. It's not like a bait and switch. It's just straight up the Muslims are the bad guys. Which, if that's what you want, that's fine. It works. Chapter 2 is a shift to a group of terrorists who are sort of plotting the specifics of the attack on America. And it's actually quite interesting, the plans they go through to like make the attack happen all simultaneously across the country. And there's this actually really cool thing where like they set mortars, anyway, they set them up with like blocks of ice. And so the ice melts slowly. And by the time it melts, the shell, munition, whatever, the thing drops down into the mortar launcher and fires off, but they're, long gone by the time that happens. Chapter 2 basically just focuses on those guys. Chapter 3, we've got a terrorist who kills his talkative helper, which, goes a long way to show that these are the bad guys. They kill their own. Yeah, there's mortar shells like raining down on refineries all across the country. There is actually a really cool sort of scene where, like, there's vets who work in the oil refineries. They recognize the sounds, incoming mortar fire, and like they all run for cover. I thought that was a cool little moment, but yeah, it's mortar raining down on oil refineries, so you can't really run anywhere. Big explosions everywhere. After that, there's like a high-level rundown of what happens all across America, and how it's been brought to its knees by these simultaneous attacks. Oil refineries, tunnels, bridges, like the power grid, the basic building blocks of the infrastructure, the main support beams of America, they're all sort of swept out at the same time. And so America is just brought low by these, a couple of terrorists. But again, it's just America. So does this qualify as an apocalypse? Is it disaster fiction? Totally, very much so. In chapter 4, we finally get to meet the main character, Jim. Now, he's on a business trip far away from home on the other side of the state. And yeah, so it's set up straight away that this is going to be a get back home style story for him. Now, straight away, he's obviously a prepper. He mentions that stores only have 3 days worth of food in them, which, that's an interesting little bit of information there for people. Stores don't actually stock a lot of food. So he watches the news early one morning and he sort of instantly realizes something's gone very, very wrong. Because, like, there's no power. But he's still getting news. Like with October Fall, this book sort of switches between third person and first person. The main character's first person, but then all the other characters are third person. I'm sort of thinking, again, this is only 2 instances, but we're going to have to wait and see for what happens next. But it seems like this is the standard. But, I'm happy to change that at a later date. He starts sending out text messages, but it's in all caps. That's like a weird quibble, but like, who texts in all caps in 2015? And I get that he's an older guy. Late 30s, early 40s, nobody texts in all caps in 2015. Straight away, once he realizes things have gone wrong, he's all prepped already. He's got his bug out bag. He never goes anywhere without his bug out bag. He sort of just makes an assumption about the cause of the lack of electricity, and then he goes and gets his prepper co-worker and just lets him know. He's like, yep, it's happened, let's get going. And the other guy's like, okay, cool. So there sort of seems to be this thing where like the prepper makes an assumption of what's happened, and then, because it's a prepper book, they're just proven right. Now, I'd hate to think how many times these people in the real world, like real preppers, have sort of been like, oh man, here it is, it's time. But then it's been like a false alarm. That wouldn't make for a very interesting story now, would it? But it's just sort of interesting that like, this is the one time out of 1,000 where like, they make that assumption and it's just proven correct. That sort of seems to be a key element here. Oh yeah, so Randy, the older female co-worker, her name is Randy Ward, which is just, that sort of struck me as like a strange name for a female. Randy obviously has like sexual implications, and Ward is like someone you're looking after. So it's like horny, protectee. But again, she's like a older female co-worker, so like, I don't know, it was just a weird choice. They've done this interesting thing with the main character in that he's kind of like a blunt asshole. And so they hammer home over and over and over in chapter 4 that like he just doesn't get along with others. And we'll sort of see why in a bit. But yeah, it's sort of used as a way for him to sort of like just deliver prepper information, because he's just like just blunt to the point and just tells people what's going on. It's an interesting mechanic to sort of allow them to sort of, deliver info. Chapter 5, we jump to the main character's wife, Ellen. She mentions that his family absorbed all the prepper knowledge through osmosis, which is an interesting thing. He's left instructions for his family. That's something that's sort of here and in October Fall as well. The daughter's more like the dad. That's a similar setup as well. They have an exhaustive supermarket shopping scene where they, have a list and they just get everything they need to. while everyone's sort of like still sort of reeling from the attack. They're ready, they're out there, they're getting what they need just before everyone gains their feet and starts doing the same. They use the word apocalypse a lot. Again, it's just America. I'm not really sure that qualifies. Chapter 6, we're back to the main character. He likens the feeling of the morning where it's happened to 9/11, which is something that's recent enough that people in the audience are going to remember 9/11, like in the real world. Now, that was a terrorist attack that was also done by Muslims. That was actually a very interesting trick to sort of bring about the same sort of visceral reaction to what's happened in the story to the real world. So I'm going to give props to that because that was well done. You know, you want your audience and like, you want them primed to sort of be feeling the proper way for your story. And if you can liken that to like a real world event, then go for it because it was very effective. This chapter sort of, they got very physical descriptions, like clothing, looks, you know, like it's all very like tactile in how he sort of interacts with the world. But again, it sort of gets to the point where he's like telling, not showing. There's a point made that police and the government in general are causing as many issues for people as the terrorists are by just cutting off fuel because, you know, it's a national emergency. So what does the government do? It clamps down and tries to maintain control, which doesn't help people on the ground. If you're a prepper, the government isn't necessarily your friend. I thought that was an interesting little thing to point out for people. There's a few of these throughout the story, but there's a very weird line where it's like these people immediately became very, very pissed. Overall, I thought the story was pretty well written, but there's a few instances where like some of the dialogue sort of goes to sort of like teenage boy, high school adventure story. Yeah, so it switches from the main character's first person and then drops background information on like complete strangers, but in the same chapter. So like, is that even third person at that point? I don't know. Again, like the narration in these stories is all over the place. I can't quite keep up. So I think it's like a truck stop and there's like a trooper and he just starts shooting into the crowd. So you have to remember this is like the morning of the terrorist attack. It hasn't even been like a few hours and there's already like state troopers. Are they police? We don't have them in my country. Is there any difference? Anyway, the point is there's like a state trooper and he just starts shooting into like a riot that's happening, which just sounds like, I don't know, is that realistically going to happen? And like, it just feels very, very fast for me. Like everything falls apart way too soon. And so I can't tell if this is what people realistically think is going to happen if there's a big terrorist attack like this, or if it's just, you know, trying to set the stage for like what the narrative needs it to be. It just feels very, very quick. But anyway, we can move on from that. So you've got the main character, Jim, his prepper co-worker, Greg, you've got Randy, but there's been this other character called Lois, and she's kind of been like a bitch the whole time. She's been butting heads with the main character ever since the start. She's just running along. She gets like killed in this ride at the very start. In one of the Jurassic Park movies, one of the more recent ones, not the first 2 or 3, there's this woman who's like babysitting the kids in the park when all the dinosaurs escape. She's like the nicest woman ever. She's like an assistant to like some bigwig in the Jurassic Park corporate. And she's babysitting the kids. And then she just gets killed. And you find out, like, the director was just talking about it outside the film, obviously. And he's like, yeah, I just needed someone to die. And so I just chose her. And she's just like running along. She just gets like munched. And you're like, what the hell? So my point here is, do you set it up that a character is a bitch and then she dies and you don't feel bad because like, oh, she's a bitch, whatever. Or do you set it up as, oh no, she was like really nice. Like, oh, why did she die? Which has more like narrative impact? I guess, do you not want the characters to be stressing about it too much and to just sort of move on? In that case, make her a bitch. Nobody cares, whatever. Keep going. Or do you want them to sort of like slow down and get bogged down in like the loss? In that case, yeah, make her someone, you know, the readers and the characters like. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting point. Lois, you know, gets taken out. As they're trying to escape, someone in the crowd sees that they're like government employees. They try to make a claim on their car saying that like they pay taxes so they can claim their car. Which, I don't know. Would someone make that sort of appeal? I don't know. But it was just sort of funny. But yeah, and so the main character kills someone on page 41. It's page 41, but also it's 2-3 hours since the event. Probably not even that. So, you know, it's all happening very, very fast. Chapter 7 starts off with the wife back at the house. It starts off with mentioning that the husband's a prepper, but the wife put up with it. So I'm guessing that is one of the common sort of setups for preppers in the real world. The husband sort of just prepares and the wife probably thinks it's a bit too much. but she's just quietly putting up with it because she can, like, justify it. I don't know. It just feels like something has happened a few times now. This is probably one of the story's weakest points, is that the family's property is like 50 acres of just absurd preparedness. Like, they've got like a fish-stocked pond, a natural spring, and a cave. I don't know how many people in the real world have that sort of setup. It sort of feels like this is something you could present as an ideal level of preparedness, but it's not something you could present as a realistic level of preparedness that is attainable by everyone. I mean, like, who has 50 acres and a cave? A bunker, I get. Anyone can sort of build a bunker if you've got land and you can just build a basement. But like a cave? That's a lot. Yeah, there's characters running around saying, like, charge everything while you can. The generator's going to make sound that makes you a target. That's brought up again. They're going to chain up the generator. Again, they're going to block the windows to conceal the light. But the power's out entirely. Besides the generator, obviously. These sort of seem to be like the common prepper tips that sort of get presented in these novels. Also, remember, this book was written in 2015, while October 4 was written in the 2020s sometimes. I should have checked that. I'm sorry. Anyway, the point is, October 4 came out a long time after this one, and so it sort of seems like maybe they're using similar tips, and there's like that sort of natural crossover. Maybe preppers don't mind getting the same tips over and over in different books, or maybe it's like school. You just get the same bits of information drilled into your head, and hopefully you remember it by the 10th, 20th time. Anyway. So yeah, Chapter 7's back at home. Chapter 8 starts with people running out of fuel out on the highway and abandoning their cars. It's not even like lunchtime on the first day, and people are already like running out of fuel. I guess maybe some people were going to fuel up in the morning, but like, how are you running out of fuel? Also, just like as an Australian, like if I'm heading down the highway and I know there's no like fuel, I just don't drive down the highway. We got places like out in the middle of nowhere, it's like big signs that say like, this is the last fuel for like 6 hours. Don't come down here if you don't have a full tank. I don't know. I just thought that was weird. But again, it's sort of showing how desperate the situation is, like straight away. He sort of links the upcoming hard times to previous hard times via his grandfather's sort of violent youth. And something this book does is he sort of goes back and he tells stories about his grandfather, the really sort of rough upbringing his grandfather had. And he's sort of linking it to that sort of time period. Which, again, linking previous Muslim terrorist attack to this Muslim terrorist attack, that was a good touch. We had like World War II, the Depression, that whole sort of era. We've all got grandparents who went through tough times. And sort of linking these upcoming times to those, like everyone can sort of relate to that. So that was a nice touch. There's the old, people will get desperate, and you can't depend on cops to help you. That sort of gets said a lot. The main thing that sets this terrorist attack apart from the 9/11 terrorist attack is that it's attack on resources and like infrastructure. So this sort of seems to be more in line with like the preppers' fear of people taking their stuff. 9/11 was attack on like the World Trade Center. That was like an attack on business, international trade or commerce and all that. Not really the everyday preppers like field, but like an attack on the infrastructure, like fuel, being able to travel, you know, that's much more ground level. It affects the everyday people a lot more. I thought that was an interesting sort of like a little distinction there. Yeah, they see some guy siphoning gas from a woman's car. Again, I guess if you're desperate, it feels a bit soon. There's a token character who doesn't quite grasp the severity of the situation. That, again, seems to be a main aspect of these stories. You need that person who just doesn't understand. Unlike the prepper, who fully gets it. There's a line, it's like, she didn't understand how serious things were. I was getting aggravated with people's inability to see the bigger picture. Again, he's sort of been written as like a tactless asshole. So he's just able to say these things, and it's like, it's just in line with his character. Yeah. It feels cheap, but it's effective. Also in line with his, you know, being an asshole is he just bails on a bunch of people. And he's also like keeping his supplies secret from all his co-workers. He's working with them, but not so close with them. So that's a sort of interesting situation. Another quote, people who had not made preparations would start going hungry. So again, if you're not prepared, you're screwed. Now, there's an interesting like about face here because they meet like an elderly couple and he gives the elderly couple some water because the wife's not doing so great. Now, I think this was probably done to show that he was a hard ass, but he was the hard ass with a heart of gold. So like he does care and he will help out people. If you think about like the elderly and children, like these are people you can help and not sort of be guilted by it. And if you see like an old woman who's not doing so great, no one's going to have a go at you for giving her some water. And it's a way to get some brownie points with the audience. So I sort of feel like he's been an asshole up until this point, and he's sort of becoming like a bit unlikable. But then once he gives his woman water and helps him out a little bit, that sort of brings him back up to, back in the black. Another quote for the older gentleman. This was a man who could not comprehend the current circumstances. I read that and I was like, okay, this is what it's about. They need to show the old man being like nice, polite, sympathetic, but he's completely unprepared for what the world is now. He's a good guy, but the world isn't the same anymore. So it's a way to sort of show that like who you were yesterday doesn't matter, because it's who you are now that really counts, because this isn't the same world anymore. And if you play by the old rules, basically you're screwed. Chapter 9, we're back with the main character's family. They mention that the main character's got a great attention to detail, while his wife is very particular. So it's kind of weird, but they sort of just start dropping character traits and just telling you what they are. There's an ad for something called a Wagan Power Dome. I don't know what that is. I don't know if I said it properly, whatever. Again, this is a proper fiction. They're going to start name dropping items that are sort of well recommended. So, Wagan Power Dome, whatever that is. The kids are used to like weeks-long camping trips. Despite their age, they're prepared for like this sort of situation just via past experience. Hint, hint, take your kids camping and they'll get used to roughing it, so they're more prepared for when this sort of thing happens. Just like with October Fall, it seems that preparing, especially at the house, is moving things around. Like, you've got your day-to-day life, which is fine. But when things happen, you've got to start moving stuff around. You've got the stuff, that's part of being prepared, but like it's not in place and ready. I don't know if this is part of the narrative expectations, but like, or just filling out the word count. But yeah, in both books, they start moving stuff around and sort of start preparing that way. Yeah, so again, it's sort of hashed out again that the daughter is the more prepared and more practical, just like the last book. Interesting point is that she just straight up tells the neighbor that they're preppers, so they're prepared. So maybe the neighbor is also one, I don't know. While she's talking to the neighbor, who she seems to get on with just fine, the neighbor sort of mentions that there's a trailer park nearby and all the poors are going to be trouble, which again links up pretty well with October Fall, and that like it's the poor people nearby that are going to be your biggest concern. Not the people who launched the terrorist attack, it's the poors. I kind of felt like the neighbor was going to be like a bad guy. Aha, he was waiting the whole time and now is his chance. But no, that doesn't eventuate. I think I have to sort of stop expecting traditional story beats in these sort of books because they just never sort of happen. But again, I'm learning. Chapter 10, we're back with the main character. They're walking up to a town. They don't get to the town just yet. They're walking up to a town and there's a church group there like giving out food. And he takes the church's food. So I thought about this while I was reading it. And I was wondering, he takes the food, which is, the smart thing to do. But it's not something he would advocate for. He's like, giving away food would be dumb. But I will take food. Now, did they make him give the old woman water? So it seems okay that he's taking the food now? Is that like a moral payoff there? Like he helped someone so he can take help in return? I don't know. Or is it just like, take all the food you can get? Never give away food, but take all the food you can get. Is that sort of what they're going for? I don't know. It sort of just stuck out to me as an interesting point. He starts saving plastic water bottles. Why not? You gotta take water with you. He continually points out that people are wrong for not thinking it's an apocalypse. Again, he doesn't know the full extent of the situation, but it will pay off because he's right. But he can't know that yet. Again, it's only been like a few hours. And he's like, this is it. This is the apocalypse. And he's right. Do people do this in the real world? I don't know. Like, it would just be weird. Like, imagine if there was like a power outage and like your neighbor was like, holy hell, man, like the world's ended. This is it. This is the big one. And you're like, oh yeah, okay. And like the power comes on in the morning and you're like, well, that was fun. And he's like freaking out living in this bunker. I don't know. It's just weird. Again, this is the one time where they're correct. That sort of seems to be another key aspect. They make an assumption and they're correct. There's a point made that preppers distrust FEMA and they like liberty. It just felt like they needed to tell us that. There's an interesting rumor that it was like Pakistani terrorists. And then there's like a Pakistani clerk. I think it's like a hotel they go to, a hotel or a motel they go to. Now, I don't know if that was like the author saying like, oh, we heard it was the Pakistanis. And then they have like a Pakistani there, like, oh, but they're not all bad. Is that like a CYA type situation, covering your ass? I didn't mention this earlier, but this guy really likes guns. And he's actually got like a second gun with him. He makes like a really big point about his guns. Because the first thing he did when he was younger and he got like a full-time job is he went out and bought a gun. And it's like a full-on flashback, like he goes and he buys a gun. And he actually says, I carried that gun for 20 years. I knew it intimately. What does that even mean? How do you know a gun intimately? The jokes write themselves. Yeah, he gets a self-righteous little asshole comment into like the non-prepper right before the end. Like there's all these little jabs at the non-preppers. But again, his whole character is that he's an asshole, so it's sort of justified. Chapter 11, we're still with the main character, and there's an interesting quote where he says, "The world had bigger problems." No, America had bigger problems. Australia was fine. Everywhere else was fine. But anyway, a pair of junkies come up and attack the group. They're sort of set up to be a bit like orcs. Junkies are just evil. Just kill them. It's fine. Don't even think about it. So they just kill some junkies. And yeah, he's called a badass for just shooting them. It's kind of funny. Yeah, another quote. "This could be the new normal." It's not even been 6 hours. And they're already like laying the groundwork for the readers to accept that this is the level of crazy things are going to be at. Yeah, just kill junkies. It's fine. Whatever. Chapter 12. We're still with the main character. "Apparently some people have not been able to put the pieces together for themselves. Those were the people who would not be prepared for the difficulties of the coming year." It really hammers home the idea that it's the sheeple who are not wise enough to prepare, and they're not smart enough to figure it out yet. Everyone's screwed except for the preppers. And this is where they sort of deliver that, 90% will be dead in a year stat. Between this and 2015 and like October 4 and like 2021, maybe? 2020? I don't know. That's like a good 5-ish, 7-ish years of the same stat being used. So I get the vibe that all these prepper books are sort of drawing from the same pool here. There's a sheriff who gives an interesting speech. It's actually a pretty good scene. And he's like, "Yeah, you guys can't come into town. You'll have to go elsewhere. And we're going to set that up for you. But you can't come into town. We're not taking you in. So, bye." But, yeah, it still sort of feels like this is all happening too fast. Again, not even lunchtime. Multiple people have been killed. But hey, that's the world the author wants. Chapter 13, we're with the main character's wife. There's a product placement for a pretzel headlamp. There's a gun safety basics lesson. Again, they sort of push the daughter's the practical one. The son's, a bit too trusting. There's a quote, "We have to be on the lookout that no one takes any of our supplies." Again, preppers really care about the supplies. They all went out shooting as a family. They're ready. Is that something Americans do? They all take each other out shooting? This is probably one of the worst lines I've ever read in my life. But it's like, she understood why he bought guns. It was because he loved his family and he wanted them to be safe. Oh, that is horrible. They give the specifics of a shotgun. He's got thousands of rounds of 5.56. His daughter's off carrying out other duties. They got tens of thousands of rounds of 22 caliber. I don't know guns. An interesting point is that the husband never got around to fixing the generator with an electric switch instead of a pull rope. Now, this feels like an excusable amount of shade to throw on him for not being fully prepared. So he is prepared. It's just not been optimized. So this feels like he's not perfect. He did make a mistake, but it's just like a little tiny, easily forgivable mistake. It feels like this is their attempt to like give him some a character flaw. Again, like with the being the asshole, just so he can deliver prepper knowledge. They don't power everything in the house from the generator, just what they need. It's all cut off from the circuit box. A very similar setup to October Fall. That sort of seems to be a bit of prepper knowledge they want you to know. They list out the food they're eating, so that sort of gets looked into. They sort of really hammer home with the quote like, "There might not be as much food tomorrow. Impending scarcity. Uncertainty." They mention Jobox. It's like a tradie's tool safe. Again, product placement. He's just got hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition. I don't know how much that is. It sounds like a lot. How do you buy that much ammo without ending up on a government watch list? Like, I'm just trying to quickly do the math in my head. Like, unless you're like firing a minigun. I guess they're preparing for the long haul, aren't they? They got like years worth of ammo. The wife says something like, "She had to assume Jim had a few tricks up his sleeve. At this moment, she was very comforted by that thought." Again, her husband is crafty, he's prepared, he's wise, he's thought about everything. That gives her comfort. Right at the end of the chapter, again, it's the desperate people that are the threat. Not the terrorists who destroyed your country. It's the desperate people. Chapter 14, we're back with the main character. The others refuse the free food. And the main character and his prepper sidekick, they sort of took the food and, they're all made to look very dumb for not taking the free food. Again, would he have given away food? Probably not. The others are stupid for not taking the free food. You can take charity, but just don't give charity. Unless we need the readers to like you a bit more. They voiced distrust in FEMA, not putting trust in the government, even though they work for the government. That was a very strange choice, but hey, they went for it. They reiterate that nowhere is safe. Everywhere is dangerous now. This is back to the Wild West days. At this point, the group actually splits up. The one who chooses to go with the preppers, Randy Ward, horny sidekick. She is shown to be the correct and independent thinker, She's the smart one. Everyone else is dumb. The sheeple who are going off with the government-provided buses. I think they're worried that, like, the buses are going to take them to, like, refugee camps. I just think, like, if a bus is going to take you, like, even, like, 100 kilometers, that's days of, like, your walking time. Just get on the bus. When they try and corral you into the refugee camp, just make a bolt for it. Just run. That seems like a logical choice for me. But hey, I'm not a prepper, so what do I know? Chapter 15. The main character. There are other people like me who feel the need to be prepared. Yeah, he just straight up says it. There's a quick rundown of what's in his bug-out bag and the rationale behind each item. There's a weird little instruction segment on how to make an impromptu bug-out bag. Just like make a bag out of junk and just carry stuff with you. They start rearranging their bags. Like everything's still in the store packaging. So it sort of makes sense, like they wanted to protect it until they needed it. So obviously they got to start taking it out of the packaging. But yeah, it feels like indulgent in terms of the narrative. But again, these books, they really do love like the packing and unpacking of the bug-out bags. That sort of seems to be like a key thing. You can't just show it once, you've got to go over it again and again. Now, they make a point of like the hotel, motel, whatever, outside of town being flooded. But then he goes up to the top floors and they're empty. Now, they need to be empty because he starts breaking into a vending machine as they're stealing food. So again, the hotel is flooded because obviously it's an emergency. But at the same time, they need him to get up there and steal food, but not cause a scene. So there's nobody up there. So you sort of got two plot points that are sort of butting heads there. Like you can't have both, but they just sort of glossed it over. Whatever. He makes a point of grabbing the calorie-dense snacks and avoids the calorie-deficient stuff, which I guess makes sense, but at the same time, like, why not take it all? Like, if you're stealing it, just take everything. He steals toiletries, plastic bags, soap, toilet paper. That was a nice touch. Think of the small stuff while you're there. He steals more food, and he justifies it to himself. Again, I don't know where, like, the line for preppers is on, like, stealing. I had this same problem with October Fall. They're just stealing stuff. It's okay in some instances when they do it, but not okay in other instances where others do it. I think I need a strict written down guidelines of, what is acceptable in terms of theft in an emergency. Another quote. That's our new world for a while. Get used to it. He really seems to like giving other people reality checks. Like he's the one who's figured it out. He needs to sort of bring everyone else up to speed. So this is like the end of the first day. They plan to leave at 5 a.m. There's decent enough reasoning because all the poor people, all the weak people, all the stupid people, they're all still going to be asleep. And it's a good chance for them to get a head start. At the same time, they come up with this weird reason to leave the hotel door open so they can hear all the bad things happening outside. Like they're really worried about security, but they need to sort of show how bad things are outside, so leave the door open. It's weird. Like again, there's segments where it's like things don't make sense and they want their cake and to eat it too. Chapter 16, we're still with the main character. He avoids all the sleeping people crammed into the foyer and they sort of get out without drawing attention. Now, for some reason, he carries detailed maps of the nation's highways and he's even got like topographical maps of the state. So they did something similar in October Fall. Like the guy there just collected maps. Like, is this a thing they do? They all collect maps. Like, are there map makers out there going like, oh, thank God for the preppers. Our paper map making business would be under if it weren't for the preppers. There's a ad for a GPS system. Apparently lithium batteries are lighter and they last longer than alkaline batteries. That's good to know, I guess. I didn't know that. Salmon hiking boots. They stay dry. Again, good to know. I don't know what salmon is. Maybe the fish? I doubt it's the fish. Yeah, a lot of product placement here. Yeah, they decided to take the Appalachian Trail home. It's interesting. That's very, very much off the beaten path. Like they want to stay off the highways, sort of stay away from big groups and like dangerous people. Even me, what little I know about America, the sort of people you're going to meet out on the Appalachian Trail doesn't sound like a good idea. Anyway, he carries beans and rice in plastic bottles in his bug-out bag. Interesting little prepper tip. Another quote. In light of our current circumstances, I would no longer refer to you as paranoid. Let's just call it prepared. So, one of the other characters typically would have called him paranoid, but because of the current situation, they've decided to upgrade him to prepared. You can have that too, if you're prepared. Just showing that when things go wrong, the normies will like you more when you are proven correct and useful. Product placement for a Katadyn hiker pump filter? I don't know what that is. It's like a pump filter for water, I guess. Randy sort of turns her nose up at drinking water from puddles. But he mentions that he's like glad to get any water. And so I sort of feel like this was sort of mentioned to show that he's been in very tough situations before. He tells a story about how like he was stuck out hiking and he ran out of water and he was like drinking water from puddles. But that sort of sets up a situation where it's like, okay, they didn't have to do that in this situation. So was that situation worse for him personally? I mean, like, that sounds pretty rough. Like, if you got no water and you're sitting, like, laying down in the dirt drinking water out of a puddle, that's a pretty bad situation. You're in dire straits there. So he's been in that situation before, but he's not there now. There's this weird situation where the prepper is sort of shown to be more prepared and more experienced, but that sort of puts them at odds with the current narrative because they've been in the worst situation, and if this isn't like the most dangerous or extreme situation they've been in before, then why are we reading about it? Like, if he's been in a worse situation in terms of like preparedness, why aren't we reading about that? Again, it's the narrative sort of butting heads with like prepper narrative expectations. It happens a lot because you can't have him be unprepared or phased by stuff that's going on because then he's just not prepared. So just by the fact that they're prepared for what's happening right now, they become sort of like narratively inert. For all my complaints about this genre so far, they're actually really interesting characters, like archetypes, just because of the way they operate. But anyway, I'm getting lost in the weeds. Chapter 17, still with the main character. He makes a point that he would kill a man and rob a vending machine, but he wouldn't litter. Like, I don't know, it was just a weird thing to bring up. They stop and have a chat with a farmer. It's a bit of an info dump, but the farmer conversation was interesting. The rest of that was just a bit meh. Chapter 18, we're back with the main character's wife. The cows escaped, and she's running around the yard trying to, corral them back into the pen, or the paddock, or whatever cows stay in. And there's just two guys just standing at the fence, like, creepily watching her. Why? Like, are they there to steal stuff? Surely they would have seen the cows, like, wandering around outside the fence, and they would have taken... Anyway, again, it feels all set up and staged. There's a really interesting point where, like, the mum is sort of talking about, like, how bad things can get. And she's like, we could be raped, robbed, or killed. Now, if you're talking about how bad a situation is, you sort of escalate the threats. But she put raped as being less severe than being robbed, which is concerning. That sort of gave me pause. I was like, huh. Their priorities are very sort of skewed there, at least for me personally. Yeah, so anyway, she gets the cows back. She shoos the guys off. And she's like, she could not fail so miserably again. It's very on the nose. Another quote. Ellen wondered if they still thought he was silly under the present circumstances. About her husband. Everyone thought he was a bit weird and silly because he was a prepper. But now, she wondered if they thought that still. Validation. Chapter 19, we're with the main character's wife again. We meet the main character's dad. He's got a dog, again. All good guys have dogs. He's not a prepper. He's sort of set up to be like a good guy who doesn't understand the severity of the situation. And I'm sure he'll, be convinced of the error of his ways at some point. It's actually really interesting. The main character is sort of shown to be a hard ass. His dad's a bit softer, but then his grandfather was a hard ass as well. So it sort of shows that, like, it sort of seems to skip a generation. Because, like, his son's not that tough either. Is this sort of linking that whole, like, strong men make good times, good men make, what is it? Strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. So it sort of skips a generation. I don't know if that's something the author was intentionally going for, but it sort of struck me as weird in this sort of instance. It was a pretty short chapter. Chapter 20. This chapter is literally just the wife reading out a list of traps and defense ideas her husband wrote down for her. That's it. Chapter 21. Back to the main character. It's literally just him walking and talking about hiking. Another short and sweet one. Chapter 22. Back with the main character's wife now. The main character's parents come and stay with the wife and kids. This sort of seems to be a thing in prepper stories. People moving into the same house to defend it together. Bringing the tribe together. Consolidating. It's not like the old days where everyone can have the house and they all live alone. It's like, no, you got to come back to the old ways where we all live together and defend it as one. There's a lovely quote. Jim has prepared for something like this. Okay. I always thought he was a little paranoid, but I'm not so sure now. Again, these quotes, they're all about that validation. His paranoia came from being better informed than most of us. He was aware of the risks and vulnerabilities. He foresaw the terrorist attack on the infrastructure. Lots of people do know about the vulnerabilities of the US infrastructure. It's not doing too good. The dad collects ammunition as well. Like, again, is this just something Americans do? They just collect ammunition? We don't really have anything like that in Australia. A bunch of poor people come up to the house and they beg for food. And the wife gets a little speech in about how she's not there for welfare or to support the leeches. The poors get angry, but the wife's shotgun keeps them all away. But obviously they'll be back. They're the poor and desperate people. They got no other choice. Again, this is the second book where it's the low-class schlubs. They're the real antagonists. So, yeah, I'm interested to see if this is sort of how this whole genre is set up. But that was chapter 22. Chapter 23, we're back with the main character. They meet some hikers on the trail. They've been out on the Appalachian Trail for so long. They're completely unaware that things have even happened. which, makes sense if you've been out bush for a while. Like, you're just going to miss all the news. Like, remember during COVID, there was like some guy camping out in the bush, and he sort of wandered into town and he sees everyone walking around wearing masks, and he just starts freaking out because he has no idea what's happened. Anyway, they pick up 2 followers. It's weird because they didn't seem untrusting of them. Like, they don't trust anyone else, but these 2 hikers, they trust them. Is it just because they need them there for the narrative? Yeah, then he sort of hints that he hears an ATV. That was a bit of foreshadowing. That was good. Chapter 24, we're back with the main character's wife. There's a basic rundown of how to set simple traps. 2 guys try to sneak into the property. Who would do that in America? Everyone has guns. I'd be scared to just walk up to the front door on a property in America, not sneak onto a property. It's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, so the son kills one of them. He wounds another one, I guess. It's been like a day. And your teenage son is just like killing people. But again, I guess they did see the cows running around earlier. And so they're like, okay, this woman is alone. She's got food. They may see her as a easy target because, again, they're poor and stupid, so they may not be thinking correctly. Again, I just wouldn't run onto anyone's property in America. Yeah, so they made the last redneck like a piece of shit, just so you don't feel bad when the wife comes out and executes him. Chapter 25, we're back with the main character. He starts talking about his internal clock. I didn't mention this in the last book, but the main character in that book starts talking about his internal clock as well. Again, I'm only 2 books in, but is this something they all go on about? All preppers have like an internal clock. They get up with the natural rising of the sun or something. He's keeping his empty water bottles. Just keeps talking about the food he's packed. He brings up the drinking from the puddle again. He doesn't trust the 2 hikers as much as his co-workers. So he's not sharing like all with them, but he does need them. So he's giving them like a little. Again, they sort of seem to be towing the line between like they need them for the narrative, but they can't let him get too close because he wouldn't naturally be that trusting. And so, again, with a lot of other stuff in this book, there sort of seems to be this tightrope walk of what the story needs versus what actually makes sense. Chapter 26, we're with the main character. He doesn't consider himself a leader, but he's fallen into the role. Kind of felt like a humble brag. He's got a solar phone charger. The other guy mentions that he wanted one, which, again, that sort of seems to be a thing as well. It's not just about having the cool shit. You've got to have someone there who envies you for having the cool shit. This is another one of those instances where like the book butts heads with needing to be realistic but also a story at the same time. He says to someone, he's like, you should start backpacking. It gives you an excuse to buy a lot of prepper gadgets. So imagine your country has been like sent back to the Stone Age by terrorists. You're already out hiking on the Appalachian Trail with some co-workers and some other hikers. Who are you going to tell to start backpacking so they can buy prepper gadgets without raising an eyebrow? It's just not something you're going to say. The situation, it just doesn't make any sense. He's not talking to the other characters. He's talking to the audience. He's saying, guys, if you want to be a prepper, you should start backpacking and hiking because, one, you'll get fit, which is always good. But 2, you're going to be able to buy a whole bunch of cool prepper stuff. Again, it doesn't make sense for the story, but it makes sense for the genre, which is just weird. And then he starts talking about food again. He calls himself a mountain masochist. He's sort of set up in like the perfect apocalypse for him. He gets to hike home and he's a hiker. It's great. The hippies don't like guns. That was a massive surprise. But yeah, there's a big gun speech and the guns make the hippies feel uncomfortable. And then the main character is just like, would someone raping your girlfriend make you feel uncomfortable? Oh man. It was actually really smart making him like a blunt asshole because you can just say the most ridiculous things and it's all in line with his character. He mentions that he has to tap into his unemotional, coldly practical side. I don't have time for feelings. I need facts. Oh, and then he actually says, I don't have time for debating my actions with sheltered and misguided children. Yeah. So he basically just spokes out and gives practical survival advice without breaking character. It's ridiculous, but I got to admit it makes sense. It was a good move. 2 hillbillies arrive on an ATV. They are clearly hardened criminals and have got a bunch of stolen stuff with them. The hippie backpacker dude provokes them by sticking to the old world rules, and he gets scared away, and the main character gets to sort of step in and look tough. But obviously these guys are going to be back. Chapter 27, the main character gets called paranoid again, but we know he's going to get proven correct. He lays out sort of why he knows that the ATV guys are going to be coming back and that they've been attacking hitchhikers. At this point, the hippie makes the really ridiculous choice. He's like, I won't carry a gun. But he knows they're going to be taking shifts while they camp the night. And like, anyone can clearly see these guys are going to come back and try and take your stuff. But he's just still sticking to like his hippie, non-violent ways. Again, the story needs these guys to be stupid. And so they're stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's what the story needs. So let's just go with it. And also, it allows the main character to chew out the hippie, because he's more dangerous than a home intruder. The author says that the main character breaks his virtue in terms of like the hippie. He's like, the hippie's trying to be all virtuous and saying he won't have a gun, but then the main character comes in and he breaks his virtue. Anyway, after all that, he proceeds to give the first 2 watches to the hippies, like back to back. Like, if you don't trust these people, if you think they're dumb, why would you give them back-to-back watches? Why would you give them watches at all? It just seems dumb. But the story needs it, so it happens. Chapter 28, still with the main character. Of course, the hippies fell asleep, because, that's what they were always going to do. That's what the story needed. So there's a bunch of murderous hillbillies sneaking around trying to kill them. But then the characters just start discussing night vision goggles, like the quality and cost and all that. And like, they're getting hunted. And they're doing like product placement. It doesn't make any sense. And then a very strange thing happened. Someone sort of brings up, they think he's in the military. Now, this felt like a very weird way to show his level of competence. Well, probably confidence as well. Now, if you see someone being a badass, it's sort of natural to assume they've got some sort of training, like a cop or being in the military or something. You're like, okay, you're at this level. Oh, you're in the military? Okay, that makes sense. But we know this guy wasn't in the military. We know he's just a civilian. But he's still at that level. So it's sort of like an instant like, oh, you're just a normal person, but you're this much of a badass? Oh man, that's so cool. Again, like, it's just having someone mistake you for being in the military. I can't figure out if it's a good or a bad thing. It feels icky. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, they start looting a guy as he lays dying. Like, he's not even dead and they're just looting him. Like one of the hillbillies that has taken his stuff. That was kind of cold. And the interesting thing is that, like, with the hillbilly being dead, they get like a new backpack full of supplies. So the hillbilly stole the supplies. They kill the hillbilly. They get the supplies now. So it's like, again, they've got stolen stuff, but it's okay because we didn't take it from the guy who originally owned it. So it's a little loophole there. Chapter 29, still with the main character. And he starts with, there were philosophical differences between our groups, because the hippies are going to leave. With their lack of information. Anyway, yeah, so he clearly doesn't respect these people. There's another backpack reorganizing montage, because, they got that new backpack of goodies now, so they've got to sort of reorganize everything. They find a book, like a storybook about like a hard journey, which just, again, I guess that's something you'd do in a story, but it didn't feel very subtle at this point. They're on a hard journey. They find a book about a hard journey, linking it to something else as well, because why not? There's another grandfather flashback. That's actually pretty good. He sort of starts psyching himself up with a pep talk. Not a prep talk, a pep talk. But basically like, we gotta harden the fuck up, to himself. Chapter 30 was still with the main character. The hippie dude got killed because of the redneck that was killed earlier. And you sort of know that this is going to be written off as like the rednecks are going to blame the main character and his group for this. Because that's just what these poor, dumb people do. They make a choice. They get the consequences of that choice. But then they refuse to accept those consequences, and so they blame the main characters. The hippie dude dies. The female sort of rises to the occasion. It sort of seems to be what happens in these prepper stories. Dude fails, woman steps up. Again, a large segment of the audience is females. You got to have that sort of competent female character, like, taking charge. The main bad guy, the main redneck bad guy, he just runs away. But again, he'll be back. So he's sort of shown to be like cowardly, vengeful. Not a very likable character. We're going to like when he dies. There's some combat. The bad guys all get slaughtered. The good guys get a flesh wound. There's a speech about not really having a choice in what they did. Yeah, and then he wonders if he's being hard enough. And then here, Okay, so this is a very, very bad line. He says, funny how killing people didn't have any adverse effects on me, but seeing people throw up always turned my stomach. Didn't make a lot of sense, but that's how I was made. What the hell could I do about it? That's just horrible. He's such a hard ass. He doesn't care when people die, but he's not so weird that people puking makes him feel a bit queasy. He's just shown to be like a murder machine, but he's not so inhuman that he's not able to feel stuff still. Like, it's just, again, they want the cake, they want to eat it too. But that was just, I'm pretty sure I had to put the book down at that point because that's just horrible. And yeah, they all start driving off on the ATVs. Chapter 31, we're back with the main character's wife. They make a really big deal about the son having to kill a guy. But, you put him on watch with a gun. So if you didn't want him to shoot someone, why'd you put him on watch with a gun? Anyway, they start talking about chores and duties, even for the kids. It's all hands on deck. There's another lovely quote here. Everything we have, we worked for. I'm not handing it out to people because they show up and demand it. And again, that's sort of the essence of prepper fiction. There's no real community. Everyone's just playing it nice until we get back to the state of savagery. Kill your neighbor, take their stuff. So you got to be prepared for when that time comes. Chapter 32, we're back with the main character. And as expected, the bad guys show up and blame them for killing their family. So I was thinking about this as I was reading it. And it's not a mistake that these people are blaming the main characters for killing their family. I think it's actually part of it. Like, it's part of what makes you hate them, because it's part of their inability to take responsibility for themselves. The hillbillies made a choice to go out and kill people and take their stuff. Now, any logical person would say, there is a risk in this and I might die. But they've obviously made the decision that the risk is worth the reward. The hillbillies on the ATVs earlier, they obviously run afoul of that little calculation and they died. Everyone else in the family can't really take responsibility for that. They can't take, like, we made this choice and it's our fault. And so they blame the characters. Now, that's something that's really going to rub preppers the wrong way. If your whole lifestyle is about, like, taking responsibility for yourself, your own safety in your own hands, that sort of mentality is really going to rub people the wrong way, at least in the prepper community. So there's a hillbilly who shoves his fingers into the granny's mouth, Randy. She's sort of a grandma. That's basically the closest I've seen to like a rape threat in this sort of story, but still pretty overt. The main character said Randy clearly had bigger balls than most of the men I know. Again, he sort of talks up the women. Again, massive female audience. Gotta tip the hat where you can. Gary got shot, and the hillbilly, not the hillbilly, the hippie chick is dead. So there's a very bizarre scene where he gets taken down, and he mentions he wishes he drilled to get a gun on his right side with his left hand, but he never did because he never imagined being in like this particular situation. So they're showing that he's prepared, which satisfies the prepper's expectations of a prepared protagonist, but also that he makes a mistake, sort of, which, you know, satisfies the criteria for a decent story. Because again, characters have to fail at some point in order to grow, but you can't have a prepper character who's a failure. So they've got to come up with these weird sort of like fringe circumstances where they fail, but it doesn't really qualify as a real failure. Like, it's such an odd and specific thing to fail at that it barely counts. Like, oh no, I didn't prepare but for training to get my gun in this particular bizarre circumstance. Like, it's technically, but at the same time, not really. Again, I think even the author knew this because they spent a lot of time on this one particular scene. Yeah, so Gary got shot, but he's wearing body armor. I didn't see body armor in the other story, I don't think. A nice little fake out. And then they just tell you that you can get body armor at police surplus stores. So, you know, good to know. We can't own body armor in Australia. Yeah, they just leave the dead hippies on the side of the road. Cold, practical. They were with us for a little way, but not part of our group, so, you know, fuck them. Chapter 33, we're back with the main character's wife. There's more rednecks there, threatening to come into someone's land. Because obviously, you know, the two that went onto the property got killed, and now their family's there as well. So the main character and his wife, they're both sort of having run-ins with like poor people who make a stupid decision, and then their extended families come in and get like angry at them, like twice in the same story. They're sort of sending a message there. But yeah, threatening to come into someone's land, that's kind of declaring war. And this is where the wife brings up that there's a fortified cave on the property, which again, who has that? Chapter 34. They finally make it to this town they've been trying to get to. Crayfish town? Anyway, whatever. The prepper main character, he's got an old friend who's even more of a reclusive, you know, prepper than him. And he says, the world went to shit a long time ago. You're just now noticing. I noticed a long time ago. Why do you think I live in the past? So they're sort of setting this guy up to be like a mentor, basically. Chapter 35, this with the main character. Sort of a prolonged flashback about how the guy's grandfather died. This is probably the best part of the book. And it sort of shows why the main character is such a hard ass. The epilogue sets up that the main character's family is going to move into the cave, you know, the fortified cave, because everyone has one of those. And that the Paws nearby are going to be plotting their revenge, so they can steal some supplies. Okay, and so that was The Borrowed World. So overall, I thought it was better than October Fall. It was written a few years ago, it's like 10 years ago now. Yeah, it felt like a much tighter story. This may be just because I know when the two respective books were written, but it feels like a more concentrated version of what October Fall is. Like, October Fall sort of feels like watered down, like a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone, than of this story. So I wonder if I would feel that way if I didn't know when the two books were written. But yeah, this feels like a much sort of more original text than October Fall. Yeah, so it is a better book, but at the same time, everything still feels contrived. They're writing things so that they can push not just the narrative, but the propaganda for the genre. There's more of an attempt to ground the characters in realism in this book. Like, they give them flaws and they make mistakes, but they're flaws and mistakes of such little consequence that they serve the story rather than like legitimizing the characters and forcing them to grow. Again, they do the same thing in this story where the main character's first person, the third, like all the other characters are third person. Again, it's only been 2 books, but it'll be interesting to see if this is a trend. if this wasn't a prepper story, with all the tropes and expectations, that go along with that, if it didn't have the product placement, the required moralizing, I'd say this was like a pretty decent story. In a weird way, it's the prepper stuff that actually holds this book back. Okay, time for the tropes I've noticed in this book. Again, tropes are things that appear in multiple books within a genre. I'm only 2 books in, so this list might evolve over time. Guns and ammunition. Lots of them. Everyone has guns. Everyone has lots of ammunition, an absurd amount of ammunition. Now, there's an interesting thing where, those who live by the gun, if they're the good guys, they survive by the gun. But good guys who don't live by guns, they don't survive. Unless they're being protected by someone. Sometimes. I don't know. You got to be good and have a gun, basically. That's what they're driving home. Dogs. Again, good guys have dogs. The event happens super quick, and people go crazy very, very quickly as society crumbles around them. I don't know if that's realistic. I get a feeling that this one makes it happen a bit too quick. 3 hours, just chaos. It feels rushed. The prepared are good. Preppers are good. The unprepared are a threat. Again, this is a book written for a certain group of people who have a very particular lifestyle. Everything here is built to validate that lifestyle. Preppers are proven right. All their assumptions are proven correct. It doesn't matter that you were wrong 99,999 times when you predicted the end of the world. This is the one time you were proven correct. Politics are on the sleeve again. The welfare losers, they can go fuck themselves. Pretty overt in this one. You can't trust the government or institutions, but the church does seem to be given a measure of trust here, which does make sense though, because it's for the more right-wing sort of audience. But again, he was working for the government, so yeah, that was a weird choice. I don't know how to square that one. Unprepared sheeple who don't grasp the severity of the situation. That's a big one. You've got to have someone who is just a good enough person, but they sort of went along with it. Life before the fall. And now they're unprepared for the world that is. You sort of need that character there to have them fail. That sort of seems to be a big part of this, because that will give the preppers in the real world, the readers, that'll give them someone who can be a stand-in for people in their lives who don't do the things that they do. It's sort of like, hey, you've got people around you who think you're silly. Well, this is going to be them when things go bad. So don't feel too bad at this point. And again, in this book, it's the poors that are the real threat. Poor people who can't take accountability for themselves. They're going to be the real threat. It's not the terrorists. It's not the enemy nation. It's the poors, the poor people next door, the poor people down the street. They're the real threat. Okay, and that's it for my analysis of The Borrowed World. Not as bad as October Fall. Still, some things that jar me. I'm not really vibing with a lot of the genre expectations. Not a terrible book. And again, you got to remember, for everything negative I say about this book, it's had thousands and thousands and thousands of reviews. It's sitting at 4.4. It's done very well for itself. It's found its audience. It's resonating with them. It is a successful book. I don't particularly like it. I think it's okay, but I don't particularly like it. I wouldn't recommend this book to people, like my friends. But it has found its audience and it's done very, very well. So there is something here that is working for people. So, with that in mind, I will continue to study these books, and I will continue to come back here, and I will continue to tell you everything I've learned. As for what's going to happen next episode, I actually don't have any idea. I need to move to the other side of the world soon, and so everything's a bit chaotic. But there will be another episode, and it'll be a surprise for us all. And with that, we've come to the point where I ask you to like, share, subscribe, but most importantly, sign up to my newsletter so I can blast you with my rantings and ravings about post-apocalyptic and prepper fiction. So, until next time, take it easy.